This is Ken Long from Delro. I want to just do a quick summary of MMAS thesis structure to ensure you understand how this thing fits together. We've got 5 paragraphs, or 5 chapters, excuse me. Introduction, lit review, methodology, analysis, and then findings and conclusions. What I'm looking for in Chapter 1 in the introduction is what's your research question? And really the tests of that for the professional body of knowledge is so what, who cares, and why bother? And what we mean by that is where's the relevance and significance and the interest in this hard work that you're about to do? It takes an awful lot of passion to get through this thing over the course of a year, and we want to make sure that your effort is applied to something that the rest of us can use that increases the body of knowledge in some way. So relevance, audience, and significance are the questions that, that's the smell test for Chapter 1. Relevance, so what? Audience, who cares? Who are you writing for? And why bother means the answers that you come up with are likely to be of use and meaningful. Chapter 2, the lit review, has to contain the background information that gives us the context to understand the things that you're going to discuss. Out here in Chapter 3 in methodology and in Chapter 4 analysis, and in the conclusion, all of those things are part of a story of research and findings and sense-making that you're going to go through. And so Chapter 2 is often the last thing that you finish with to make sure that there's enough information provided in the paper, in the thesis, to be able to answer and understand why the questions are significant, the environment that you're operating in for the inquiry, the issues that we're going to be confronted with and that people in the field are concerned with, any theory that you're going to introduce that's going to help us understand the environment, the problem, the solutions, the recommendations, and then anything about the method that you're going to use to conduct the analysis. What is it that we need to know about that particular style of inquiry or research or analysis? So once we get rid of that chapter, Chapter 3, the methodology, is simply you telling us what you're going to do in Chapter 4. You're going to tell what is your problem solving or your research strategy. It could be qualitative or quantitative. It could be a case study. It could be a survey. It could be thematic analysis. It could be crunching a math model or whatever. But the strategy is what we want to hear. If you're going to use a model, what model and how is it going to be applied? What kind of rules are you going to use to manage the data, to analyze the data, to make decisions? What processes or procedures are you going to follow when manipulating the data? What kind of criteria are you going to use that we need to understand the definitions, how you're going to define a criteria or operationalize it. And then finally, what kind of evaluation standards are you going to measure your results against, for significance? Why is that standard appropriate for the kind of answer you're going to come up with? For example, if temperature was an important part of your study, your strategy, I'm going to measure temperature using Fahrenheit or Celsius or Kelvin, or am I going to use a heuristic like, well, it was hot or cold? Is that of sufficient granularity that the standards make sense? How are you going to measure? Under what conditions, the rules, are you going to measure? The criteria, how long is the thermometer going to be out there? How long are you going to measure? What's the starting condition? How are you going to zero it out so it's always a fresh start? And then evaluation standards. Again, Fahrenheit, Celsius, Kelvin, cold or hot to the touch. And then in Chapter 4, what you're essentially going to do then is simply drive your data through the analysis. You're going to actually conduct the analysis, whether it's compare and contrast or measure, perform statistics or whatever. You're actually going to do what you described in Chapter 3. And now the interesting one for us, Chapter 5, the findings and conclusions. You're going to talk about the relevance and then the way ahead. We want to know the answers to these questions. Once we've approved your methodology and we've seen that you have applied it properly in the analysis, what we care about now is, what did you find? And then what does it mean? What are the limits of your insights? How significant are the findings? What are the implications for the stakeholders? And what further research does this point the way towards so that others can build upon the work that you have done? This is the sense-making piece of it. Once we've figured out that you have an appropriate context and that the method that you're going to use is sound and logical and consistent and appropriate for that kind of a question, and then you've followed the rules properly in conducting your analysis, we can now set that aside and really focus on the specifics of what you've found. This sort of chapters 2, 3, and 4 give you the permission to get our attention, that you've followed all the steps that are involved in good thinking, and then we can focus on what it is that you found, and we're entitled to listen to you thinking out loud about the implications and all that. So one of the things we'll look for then is a logical thread that ties all this stuff together. You have a problem that's interesting and important and relevant to your audience. You've described enough context so that we can make sense out of it ourselves. You've told us what we need to know for the purposes of this inquiry. You've told us what you are going to do with the research. Then you've done it and shown your work, and then you've made sense of it for us, and then the implication for others and beyond. There should be a connection so that everything that you discuss in findings and conclusions and the way ahead is tied directly to data that you analyzed, to data that you gathered, that you processed in an appropriate way, and that there is enough in the lit review to tell us how to interpret it, to justify your interpretation. So everything in the lit review is going to be something that we see later in a method or an analysis or in a conclusion, and that's why it's in the lit review. We need that in order to be able to understand what you're talking about. So that's a quick summary of how those chapters in the thesis fit together. Your final packaging really consists of, have I told a compelling story that shows a logical connection between each of those chapters? Everything that's in chapter 5, we've tied it to analysis with properly processed data, with a sound method, and with enough context to be able to understand the sense making that you underwent. So, thanks for your attention.